Imagine owning a private jet, a dream symbolizing success and freedom, only to be stopped at the gate, questioned, and humiliated simply because of the color of your skin. This is the story of Shaquille O'Neal, a global icon, who faced a painful reminder that even fame and fortune can't erase centuries of racial prejudice. Shaquille O'Neal's path to greatness began in Newark, New Jersey, a city known as much for its tough streets as for its resilient people. Shaq was just a kid growing up in the projects, his world surrounded by crumbling buildings, limited opportunities, and the constant hum of tension that came with being black in America. From an early age, Shaq felt the weight of stereotypes pressing down on him. His height and size made him stand out, but not always in a good way. Classmates teased him, calling him clumsy and awkward. Teachers doubted his potential. Even as a child, he saw how differently the world treated people who looked like him. His mother, Lucille, became his source of strength. She was his constant motivator, always reminding him that his worth wasn't determined by the narrow views of others. "Shaquille," she would say, "they don't define you, you define you." She instilled in him the belief that hard work and determination could change his future, no matter how bleak his surroundings seemed. Basketball became his outlet. The court was where he felt powerful, in control, and free from the judgment of the outside world. But his dreams stretched far beyond the hardwood. Shaq would often gaze up at the sky, watching planes soar overhead. To him, they represented a life of freedom and possibility, a world far removed from the struggles of his neighborhood. One day, as a teenager, he told his mom, "One day, I'm gonna own my own plane. Not just ride in one, own one." Lucille smiled, not doubting him for a second. "Then work for it, baby," she replied. That dream of a private jet wasn't about luxury, it was about proving to himself and the world that no matter where he came from, he could rise above it. The boy from Newark would one day soar, leaving behind the doubters and obstacles that tried to keep him grounded. Shaquille O'Neal's journey from a struggling kid in Newark to a global icon was nothing short of extraordinary. His basketball skills, honed through relentless practice and unshakable determination, propelled him to stardom. By the time he was drafted into the NBA as the first overall pick in 1992, Shaq was no longer just a tall kid from the projects, he was a force to be reckoned with. On the court, Shaq dominated with his size, agility, and charisma. He quickly became a household name, winning championships, earning MVP titles, and creating unforgettable moments that solidified his place among basketball's greatest legends. Off the court, he proved to be just as dynamic. Shaq ventured into business, entertainment, and endorsements, building an empire that extended far beyond sports. With his success came the ability to turn his childhood dreams into reality. Among those dreams was the private jet he had once promised himself as a boy. Shaq didn't just want to own a plane, he wanted a jet that reflected the heights he had reached. After years of hard work, that dream finally landed in front of him, a sleek, custom-designed private jet with his name proudly displayed on its side. To Shaq, the jet wasn't just a status symbol. It was a personal triumph, a reminder of the journey from the streets of Newark to the skies above. Every detail was meticulously chosen to make the jet his own, the luxurious interior, the state-of-the-art technology, and even the logo that represented his brand. It was a physical representation of everything he had achieved. The moment he saw it for the first time was surreal. Standing on the tarmac, he ran his hand along its gleaming exterior, thinking about the countless hours of work, the sweat, and the setbacks it had taken to get here. "I made it," he thought, a quiet sense of pride filling him. Excited to take his first flight, Shaq planned a trip to Los Angeles, where he had an important event scheduled. He coordinated every detail, from the flight crew to the route, ensuring that everything would be perfect for this milestone moment. But as he would soon learn, the skies weren't the only thing he needed to navigate. Even at the pinnacle of success, the shadows of prejudice still loomed. Shaq's triumph was about to be challenged by an experience that would remind him how far society still had to go. The day of Shaquille O'Neal's first private flight should have been a moment of pure joy. Dressed in his signature style, with a broad smile and an aura of pride, Shaq pulled up to the private airport's terminal, ready to board his new jet. The plane gleamed in the sunlight on the tarmac, a symbol of everything he had worked so hard to achieve. But his excitement was short-lived. As Shaq approached the security gate, the guards eyed him with suspicion. One of them stepped forward, blocking his path. "Excuse me, sir," the guard said with a tone that wasn't welcoming, "I need to see some ID and proof of ownership for that jet." Shaq paused, taken aback. Proof of ownership? It was an unusual request for a passenger at a private terminal, let alone the owner of the jet. "That's my plane," Shaq responded, his voice calm but firm. "I'm Shaquille O'Neal. You know, NBA legend, four-time champion." The guard didn't budge. "I don't care who you are. I need documents to confirm that you're allowed to be here." The implication hung heavy in the air. Shaq wasn't being questioned because of any procedural necessity, he was being questioned because of who he was, or more accurately, because of what he looked like. Shaq's frustration grew. "Do you ask every jet owner for proof, or is it just me?" he asked, narrowing his eyes at the guard. But the man didn't answer. Instead, another guard approached, escalating the situation further. What should have been a seamless moment turned into a humiliating standoff. The guards demanded not just his ID but also his pilot's contact information, the plane's registration, and even insisted on a personal inspection of the aircraft. It was clear that they couldn't fathom a black man owning such an extravagant piece of property. Shaq, unshaken but furious, made a call to the flight crew and airport officials. Eventually, higher-ups arrived to smooth things over. After a series of apologies and assurances, the guards finally stepped aside, and Shaq was allowed to board his jet. But the damage had already been done. As Shaq settled into the luxurious cabin of his plane, he couldn't shake the bitterness of the encounter. This wasn't the first time he had been judged by his skin color, and it likely wouldn't be the last. Even as one of the most recognizable figures in the world, he couldn't escape the prejudices that so many black men faced every day. For Shaq, the experience was more than just a personal insult, it was a stark reminder of the systemic racism that continued to plague society. He sat in silence as the plane took off, his excitement replaced by a simmering resolve. He knew this wasn't just about him, it was about the countless others who faced the same injustice, without the fame or platform to fight back. This moment would shape his next steps. Shaq wasn't the type to let an injustice go unanswered. The incident at the airport weighed heavily on Shaquille O'Neal's mind. He couldn't stop replaying the scene in his head, the dismissive tone, the judgmental stares, and the underlying message, "You don't belong here." It wasn't just a personal insult, it was a reflection of a broader issue that had defined the lives of countless black men and women for generations. Soon after, Shaq was scheduled to appear at a youth mentorship event. The gathering was meant to inspire young people, particularly those from underserved communities, by giving them a chance to hear from one of their heroes. But Shaq decided that this wasn't just an opportunity to talk about basketball or success, it was a chance to use his platform for something greater. The event was packed with eager faces, their eyes wide with anticipation. Shaq began by sharing his story, the struggles of growing up in Newark, the countless obstacles he had overcome, and the unwavering dedication that had brought him success. The kids hung on his every word, inspired by the journey of a man who had once been just like them. Then, he pivoted. Shaq recounted the incident at the private airport, explaining how, despite all his accomplishments, he was still treated with suspicion and disrespect because of the color of his skin. The room grew quiet as he described the anger and humiliation he felt. "I want you all to understand something," Shaq said, his voice steady but impassioned. "No matter how much you achieve, no matter how far you go, there will always be people who judge you for who you are. But you can't let that stop you. You have to stand up, speak out, and keep moving forward." Shaq didn't just leave it at his personal experience, he turned the focus onto the kids in the room. You're the next generation. You have the power to change this. When someone tells you that you can't, prove them wrong. When someone tries to hold you back, break through. The impact was immediate. Clips of Shaq's speech, particularly his candid retelling of the airport incident, began circulating online. Within hours, his message was trending on social media, sparking conversations about racial profiling and systemic inequality. His vulnerability and honesty resonated deeply, not just with Black communities but with people of all backgrounds who were moved by the injustice he faced. As the story gained traction, media outlets worldwide began covering it. Headlines highlighted the irony of one of the most famous athletes in the world being treated as though he didn't belong. Shaq became a symbol of resilience and a voice for those who couldn't speak out. Behind the scenes, however, Shaq faced pressure. Corporations and sponsors approached him, offering significant sums of money to soften the narrative or to downplay the racial aspect of the incident. Some wanted him to focus on the misunderstanding rather than the systemic racism it represented. But Shaq refused to compromise. "This isn't just about me," he told his team. "This is about every kid who looks like me. Every person who's ever been made to feel small, to feel like they don't belong. I'm not going to stay silent." The interview Shaq gave at the event, coupled with his steadfast refusal to back down, cemented his legacy not just as an athlete but as a leader in the fight for racial equality. For Shaq, this was more than a moment, it was a movement, one he was determined to carry forward. The words he spoke to the kids that day would echo far beyond the walls of that room, igniting conversations, challenging biases, and inspiring a new generation to demand better. Shaquille O'Neal had faced injustice, but he turned it into fuel for change. And the world was watching. Shaquille O'Neal could have let the incident pass. He could have brushed off the injustice at the airport as just another example of the biases he had endured his entire life. But Shaq wasn't built that way. For him, this wasn't just about personal humiliation, it was about something much larger. The viral reaction to his speech at the youth event put Shaq in an unexpected spotlight. Offers from major corporations and sponsors came pouring in, many with the same message: tone it down. Shift the focus. They waved lucrative deals in front of him, hoping he would turn the incident into a story of misunderstanding rather than a bold commentary on racial inequality. Shaq didn't hesitate. He rejected every offer that required him to compromise the truth. "My integrity isn't for sale," he told his team firmly. "This isn't just my fight. It's the fight of every Black man, woman, and child who's been told they don't belong. And I'm not backing down." Shaq's decision wasn't without consequences. Some partnerships were put on hold, and critics accused him of making the situation political. But for every detractor, there were thousands of supporters. Messages poured in from people who had faced similar experiences: Black professionals denied opportunities, families profiled in stores, young athletes doubted before they could prove themselves. The more Shaq spoke out, the more his voice became a rallying cry. He appeared on major news outlets, refusing to mince words about the pervasive racism Black Americans faced daily. On one talk show, he addressed the broader implications of the airport incident. "This wasn't just about me being stopped. This was about a system that still sees Black success as suspicious, that treats Black skin as a threat. It's about changing that system so the next generation doesn't have to deal with this nonsense." Shaq also used his platform to create tangible change. He partnered with organizations that advocated for racial justice, funding programs to educate young people about their rights and provide mentorship opportunities for Black youth. He even established a scholarship fund for students pursuing careers in aviation, aiming to challenge the stereotypes that had led to his own humiliating experience. But Shaq didn't stop there. He returned to the youth event where he had first shared his story, this time with an even stronger message. "You have to stand for something," he told the kids. "Because if you don't, they'll make you sit down. Don't ever let anyone tell you that you don't belong. And when you see injustice, don't turn your back. Speak up, even when it's hard. Especially when it's hard. His words weren't just advice, they were a challenge. The incident also led to broader industry changes. Private airports and aviation companies began revising their policies to address implicit bias, and several high-profile figures joined Shaq in advocating for more diverse representation in the aviation sector. As the months passed, Shaq continued to inspire. His willingness to confront the uncomfortable truth not only elevated the conversation around racial injustice but also reminded the world of the power of using one's platform for good. In standing for something bigger than himself, Shaquille O'Neal had turned an ugly encounter into a moment of awakening. The airport incident was no longer just a story of prejudice, it became a symbol of resistance, resilience, and the unshakable resolve to demand better. And in doing so, Shaq showed that true greatness isn't just about what you achieve, it's about what you stand for.